I'm not panting, you're panting. I am not just out of breath from running up 3 flights of stairs in high heels and back down again. Not at all. Welcome to Saturday Night at the Movies! Hey there, Fiber Junkies! Welcome back to the Color Cauldron. I'm Johanna, the owner and dyer behind Posh Yarns and host of this video channel, and today we are going to do another Saturday Night at the Movies where we pick a film that features fiber arts of some type, give a short review, and then pair it with a project that is reminiscent of the era, the style, the theme, or something in the film. I'm really excited for tonight's because I have been working on my knitted project for a really long time to go with this film, and the film that we're doing tonight is a little known film, so it's probably going to be one that a lot of you guys haven't seen before, and I always love introducing people to new movies, old movies, as in vintage cinema, that I find compelling or interesting. Today is kind of a fluffy little romantic comedy film, but it has a scene in the beginning that is one of my knitting heroes on camera, and it's somebody that I don't even know her name, but I can't wait to share it with you. So let's dive in. Tonight we're going to travel back to the 1940s, one of my personal favorite vintage eras as far as fashion, hair, and knitting go. The 1940s was a fabulous time for knitwear in general because due to the shortages created by World War II and rationing, as well as kind of that sense of anytime there's worldwide tragedy or uncertainty and chaos, we tend to look to nostalgic, down home kind of crafty things, DIY projects, etc. to get back to our roots because it feels comforting, it feels cozy, and it's a good time to make things with our hands, which produces its own kind of magic that can help to soothe your worries and your fears. So the 1940s was a big time for that because everyone all over the world was feeling the chaos and stress of World War II, the uncertainty of their future, and then due to rationing, a lot of people didn't get very many new clothes at all, and what new clothes you got a lot of times had to be made yourself, so either sewing, knitting, crocheting, etc. And knitting in particular had a huge renaissance at the time, especially stranded knits, intarsia, and other things that use small little scraps of yarn. But there was also a really big push for making knitted garments because the stretchiness of knit material meant that you could make something and it didn't have to be exactly perfectly tailored in order to fit a wide range of sizes. It was also really good for children and women having babies and other things. When your body is fluctuating and changing or you're growing a lot, it would kind of grow with you to a certain extent. So it was a good time for economical knits. And the other reason that it was really popular in the 40s is that era saw a big return to kind of a nostalgia and love of and romanticization of folklore and kind of the traditional crafts and costumes of a lot of different countries around the world. Everything from like Nordic knits, and there was a big renaissance for a while in the early to mid 40s of like peasanty costumes from like Switzerland and Austria and places like that, as well as towards the end of World War II and following the war there was a big surge for like Central and South American folkloric costumes and handcrafts, etc. So all of these reasons came together to make knitting really big in the 1940s. And today we're going to look at a film from 1946 called Heartbeat. This one was brand new to me just a few months ago. I stumbled across it completely on accident on YouTube of all places. I will put a link to the video below. This film features Ginger Rogers, another one of my favorites. Many of you may know her from her 1930s films with Fred Astaire. That's what she was most famous for, but a lot of people don't realize that she went on to have a really prolific solo career in the 40s and 50s, and she was one of the few actresses who aged very gracefully and stepped into older, more mature women roles with gusto. She was not obsessed with clinging to her youth and trying to maintain the beauty and main star charisma of a young, heroine. Back in the older days, there were fewer choice roles and really great roles for older actresses. Once you kind of got too old, they would keep making you look younger as long as they could, but at some point they would be like, okay, you're relegated to playing the star's mother and things like that. And so Ginger Rogers was one of the few who stepped out courageously and just embraced the older, kind of more dowdy roles, although she had quite a few glamorous ones as well. And she also was really great at, she was a great dramatic actress in addition to her wonderful comedy turns and her musicals. And so she had a really wide range and was able to embrace a variety of roles that helped keep her relevant and helped bringing her great roles, as well as going out and just really looking for good roles and bringing them to fruition. And so she has had a wide, varied career. So in this film, Ginger Rogers plays a young teenage girl. She's an orphan who is wanting to escape the orphanage and get out of the system that she's in. And so she runs away and joins the school for pickpockets that is run by the incomparably elegant Basil Rathbone. He has this actual formal school setting where he trains kids and teenagers to basically like Fagin from Oliver Twist. He teaches them how to be pickpockets, how to blend into a crowd, choose your victim, sneak things out of people's pockets and purses without being detected, and then bring it back to him where everybody gets to split in the profits, so to speak. So she joins this school, and she's actually having a hard time with it because she's a really, really honest kid, but she really wants to get out of the system and be independent. So as she begins to get on the streets and test her newfound skills, she selects as her victim one Adolphe Menjou, who, if you have watched a lot of his older films, you will recognize this wonderful mustachioed man. And she tries to pick his pocket, and he catches her. So she's unsuccessful in getting away, and as part of the deal, he takes her back to his house and tells her that he won't turn her into the police, but she has to do a little favor for him first because he needs her pickpocket skills. He takes her to a fancy dress ball, gets her all dressed up, and passes her off as his niece so that he can blackmail her into stealing a watch from the pocket of this handsome young diplomat. So she goes about stealing the watch, and in the process, things get very complicated because she starts to fall for her victim. Who saw that one coming? He also has fallen for her, and as they begin their flirtation and things start to heat up and get serious, she's faced with the complication of, does she tell him the truth, and does she go through with it? What's she gonna do? What's he gonna do? What is her blackmailer gonna do? And I'm not gonna spoil it for you. You'll have to go watch the film to find out how they resolve this whole thing. It's stunningly beautiful for Ginger Rogers' hair and her clothes. Her hairstyles in this film are so incredible. I absolutely love 1940s hair. It's my favorite era, and she does such an incredible job of wearing the really like voluminously huge rolls and big fluffy curls and everything else. So this film is very, very fun to watch, if nothing else, for the fashion and the hair. But it's a cute little story too. We all know that one of the main reasons we watch these fun films is because we're looking to spot the fiber arts, and this one has knitting in it. Very early on in the film, one of the early scenes, we see Ginger Rogers has run away to join the school for delinquents, and she has gotten into this pickpocket school, and she's in the formal classroom setting. Basil Rathbone is teaching these children how to select their victims and pick the pockets without getting detected, and all these teenagers and kids are sitting there like they would in a regular school classroom, like learning a lesson. And there's one girl in there who I call my knitting heroine. I don't know her name, I don't know the actress or who she is, but she is sitting there knitting industriously, and I don't think we can tell what she's knitting, but she's knitting away just like I would if I had to go back to school right now, and like I know a lot of you guys do in classes or in church or wherever it is you have to sit and like listen to a lecture or a talk or something. And even when she gets up to give a demonstration of what the teacher is discussing, she takes her knitting with her and knits through the entire thing, which is just so amazing. And I feel like she deserves an award because she not only picks the pocket successfully but does it while knitting. I'm telling you, she's my heroine. So that's our knitting scene in this fun little film. I am also really excited to show you guys my project. I have been working on this for a few months because I am a non-monogamous knitter, as we all know, and I've been working on several projects at once. So this one I started working on, then would put it down, then would pick it up, put it down, and it was also a very involved project. And when I got to the point where all the knitting was done and I just had to do the finishing, like blocking and sewing up and adding buttons and all that, I procrastinated like nobody's business because I did not want to do it, and it was a lot of finishing work and detailed, intricate work that I didn't want to get wrong, so I spent a lot of time working on it. I'm glad I put the time in because it turned out great, but it was a lot of work. And you can probably guess what it is I'm talking about because I've been wearing it this whole time to show it off. And it is this stunning little 1940s style lace short-sleeved cardigan. This marvelous little cardigan comes from a fabulous book that I've mentioned here on the podcast before, A Stitch in Time. This one is volume 2. This is by Susan Crawford and Jane Waller. There is a volume 1, which I unfortunately do not own yet, but it's on my wish list. But I have volume 2. This is patterns from 1930 to 1959. And basically in these Stitch in Time books, what she has done, she presents these beautiful coffee table books with these stunning photographs and detailed patterns. I will say this is for more what I would consider more advanced knitters. Intermediate knitters could totally handle it. And I don't want to tell beginners that they can't, because I think there are some patterns in here you could definitely tackle as a beginner. Well, as a beginner, you can do anything you put your mind to. I just know that I would have been frustrated by some of the more intricate and detailed patterns in here when I was a beginner, just because they are so complicated, as in a lot of different steps and a lot of charts, and like, I will say this book has really small print, so you have to blow up the charts and stuff because otherwise you'll strain your eyes. But it's a beautiful, beautiful book, and for each of these patterns, they've taken actual vintage patterns from the eras and have kind of redesigned and updated the patterns so that they look really, really similar or even identical to the original, but they're sized for multiple sizes because a lot of vintage patterns only come in one size, and they're made for more modern yarns and needles, and they have information that a lot of the original patterns don't have, like gauge and charts and things like that. I will say they are more authentic in their actual style than a lot of vintage to modern reproduction patterns these days. So when I say they're for like modern yarns and needles, you're still going to be using mostly fingering and lace weight yarns and some DK for sweaters, and you're going to use small needles. I used a size 3, 2, and 3 on this sweater, and fingering weight yarn, and so it's pretty intricate lace. It took a long time, and it was knit in pieces, and then you sew the seams up just like a dress pattern. So you have 2 different fronts. These are each a separate piece. The back is a separate piece. Each sleeve is a separate piece. I knit the shoulder pads. I mean, this thing was one of the most intricate patterns I've ever done. So it's a lot of work, but it's totally worth it. I really do love the outcome. I have a few things I'm not super happy about, and we'll go over those in just a minute, but overall I'm really happy with it. This particular pattern is called Kasha, and it is really, really stunning. The original was done in this fabulous yellow, and I loved that, but I was specifically wanting to knit this in one of my new colorways. I just created this last summer for my 1930s collection that just came out in my shop a couple weeks ago, and this one is called Hollywood Production Code. I will let you see it up close. It is a stunning, soft, kind of like Wedgwood type blue. So hopefully you can see that, and maybe you can see this lace pattern. It's got this very intricate lace that looks like little flower buds in these like teardrop shapes, and it is lace all over. So it's all over this sweater, in the entire body and everything. And then there is this little fold over collar that you pick up. Actually, I'm sorry, you don't pick up and knit, you knit it and then sew it on. And then you sew the sleeves, you sew on a button band. I'm sorry, no you don't, you knit the button band on, but you do sew on the collar. The button band is knit on, but then you have to sew on the buttons. There was a lot of sewing, there was a lot of blocking, and I did do a swatch for this, but I will be honest, I have heard before that for larger garments like full-on sweaters and things, it's a really good idea to do a larger than 4x4 swatch. So technically 4x4 is what most people swatch at, but I have heard that you get best results if you do like 6x6 or 6x8 or 8x8. And probably you should, but frankly that's a lot of knitting time that I feel like is wasted because I hate gauge swatching. I know a lot of you guys do too. I know it's not really wasted because then your sweater fits, but usually in the past I have found that I don't need to do that big and that a 4x4 swatch is perfectly fine. This is all over lace, however, that is blocked fairly extensively. I didn't stretch it super far because I didn't want it to get too big, but I did have to open the lace up so that those teardrop shapes really show up and are distinct and look nice. And so even though I knit a swatch and I blocked my swatch and measured it as well as I could, the swatch just didn't give me the best information, and I don't know if it was just because it was too small or maybe I blocked the sweater more aggressively than I did the swatch or something, but my sweater definitely grew. I followed the pattern for my size as closely as I could, and my sweater definitely grew. I even was less aggressive on the blocking than I thought I should be because I was afraid my sweater would be way too wide. And as it came out, the width wasn't really that big of a problem, it was the length. So my sweater is definitely too long for me. If you look at the photos in the book, her sweater hits right about her natural waistline or just below, and there is a little bit of area where this bottom ribbing band kind of like hugs her waist, and then this lace kind of blouses over the top a little bit. And I was envisioning mine looking like that, but mine is actually so long that it comes down past my natural waistline and hits more about like hip length, which is too long for a 1940s vintage look like I wanted. And so it really kind of gives it a little bit more of a modern feel, and you lose some of that like hug in of the smaller needles and the ribbing at the waistband. So even though I did the tighter ribbing, it doesn't drape the same way because it's too long, and so it kind of got heavy and sags down there. So I don't like that it's too long. The sleeves are pretty long, and I actually even shortened them a tiny bit because as I was knitting I was like, oh my gosh, these are going to be way too long, so I'm going to shorten them up just a little bit. And they're still a little long for me, but I can totally handle the sleeves. It's really the body that I don't mind, or that I don't like. The worst part for me though in this is thankfully an easy fix, because it being too long, there's really nothing I can do other than ripping and reknitting. And let's be honest, I put months into this thing and I have way too many other things I would rather knit. I am not going to go back and do that. This is definitely pretty enough the way that it is. I will wear it. And frankly, I would rather use it more as a shop sample and just keep it really pristine and nice and hang it on a padded hanger or a mannequin at shows and stuff, as opposed to wearing it a ton. So I'll probably only wear it a little bit here and there, but it's more of like a showpiece. Look what I can do. I followed this fancy pattern and I knit my own shoulder pads and all this other stuff. But the thing that's really disappointing to me are the buttons, and I will hold them up here. So I did not have any real vintage buttons in my stash that really looked pretty on this sweater and that I had enough of the right size and everything. So I went to Joann Crafts and just a big box store and looked at buttons there, and I found these stunning little blue buttons. I don't know if you can see those. They're just little blue plastic buttons, nothing fancy, but they were like the exact right color for this sweater. And I really love how a lot of vintage garments, the buttons are like an exact match, like they were made just for that garment. So either fabric covered buttons or yarn covered buttons or whatever, they look like they were designed exactly to go with that garment. And so the buttons can kind of blend in, and they're a nice little detail, but they don't like stand out and look crazy different and draw your attention. I tend to usually go for like stand out, draw your attention buttons on my knitwear, but I really like in vintage garments how subtle they look, and I wanted this to have a very prim, ladylike feel with subtle buttons. So I loved that these blue buttons were like a perfect match for the yarn. So I bought them, and I took my sweater with me when I did and like tried, you know, putting the buttons through the buttonhole, and I was like, oh, they fit. They're a little on the small side. So if they'd had one size up, I think these are like 3/4 inch buttons. If they'd had 1 inch buttons, I probably would have gone for those, but they didn't have any in this color that were the larger size. I did try a couple 1-inch buttons that were like pearls or white or silver, like kind of metal looking buttons. None of them looked good with the sweater. And the 1-inch, a lot of the 1-inch ones, I felt like they fit through the buttonhole, but barely, or maybe they didn't quite fit. They were just straining, but I couldn't quite get it through. So I was pretty sure this was the right size. Then I got it home. I spent a lot of time carefully sewing them in. I got it all done, went to go try it on. Then I went to go button it up, and they button and then immediately fall apart. And it's not that my sweater is too tight. You know how sometimes if you don't have it big enough across your bust line, your boobs will kind of like pop your buttons open? That's definitely not the problem, because my sweater is definitely wide enough. It's a little too wide, although it will work as kind of a blousey look. But the buttonholes are just too loose, which has happened to me before on hand knit garments. The buttonholes can get too loose, and then it's really, really easy for the buttons to just slip through and they don't stay. So my options are I can take all of these buttons off, find a new button, and sew them back on, or I've decided what I'm gonna do instead, because that just sounds like miserable. And let me tell ya, I want my knitwear to look good, and so I take more time to like gauge swatch and block and finish well and all these other things than I used to a few years ago these days. But I'm still the queen of like, let's just find a quick fix and make it work and move on to the next thing, because I don't want to spend like eons on a project. I am not a perfectionist when it comes to that. So what I'm going to do instead is just take my light blue yarn, and I'm going to just whip stitch a little bit on one side and sew that buttonhole just the tiniest bit closed so that it's a tighter buttonhole, and then it will hold the buttons together, is basically what I'm going to try. I hope it works. I'll let you know in a future video if it works, but that's my idea. So that's what I'm planning to do for this sweater, so that I can actually wear it without the buttons coming apart. In the meantime, I can wear it open like a little cardigan, but it really does look nice buttoned up as kind of like a button-up top with a little, it is see-through because of the lace, so I would wear like something like I'm wearing now, or like a little slip, full slip that covers my bra line and everything, and or something like that underneath it. But overall, I'm very happy with the sweater. I tell you what, I am super proud of myself, because like I said, this had a ton of finishing. And fun thing, I did several things on this sweater I'd never done before. Well, actually, I think I've done everything technically before. I just never have, like when I've sewn up seams and stuff, I've never taken as much time and effort as I did on this sweater. Like, I went all out, went slowly, laid everything on a table, got really good lighting, you know, made sure I blocked everything nicely before. I took a lot of time on the finishing. But the thing that I'd never, ever done before was knit my own shoulder pads. And you could definitely make the sweater without shoulder pads, for those of you thinking, ew, shoulder pads. But the 1940s, they really did wear a lot of shoulder pads. Not the big, huge ones from the 80s, but like subtle, soft little ones that just kind of improve the line, that just kind of make your shoulders stick up and out a little bit more to give more of that boxy kind of shape, because that was the silhouette then. And so I really wanted to get that Joan Crawford big shoulder look from the 40s. So I went ahead and followed the instructions in the book, and they tell you how to knit a little stockinette. Basically, it's just a square, and then you fold it in half, and then fold it in half again, so you're making a little triangle, like so. And then you just sew it into the top of the shoulder, and then it just sits right here and kind of creates that nice boxy but kind of rounded shoulder, and it's very comfy. When I put it on, I was like, ooh, it's like little pillows on my shoulder. I love it. So I'm really happy with that. And because you knit it out of the same yarn that you use for the body, then you don't see it through the holes in the lace or anything. It just blends right in and nobody can even see it. But it feels really nice on, and it gets a very authentic 40s feel. So I do highly recommend this book if you have not taken a peek at it before and you are at all into vintage garments, or just into knitting really stunning, fantastic things like these incredible drapey sleeves on the cover. You'll probably love this book. I will say I didn't have any problem following the pattern. I thought it was clearly written, but it is very long and intricate, so you definitely need to have like put it into, I've never used this, but I know some people use Knit Companion or a similar app like that to track it on their phone or iPad. So if you can get it electronically uploaded into that, or what I do is I just keep brightly colored Post-it notes, and I move them down every row until the sticky runs out, and then I replace the Post-it note. And that way I can like scribble notes on the Post-it note, like left off on row 34, or I use it on a chart to keep track of my chart, and I'll like make little hash marks for the repeats or whatever it is. So I highly recommend keeping track of where you are in the pattern somehow like that. Post-it note, pen and paper, charts and graphs, electronically, whatever it is that helps you. You're definitely going to need that because it's a very long pattern. It's several pages long, but it's definitely worth it. It's really, really cool. I will leave a link to where you can purchase this book below as well for those of you who are interested in getting it, because it is jam-packed with patterns from 20 different years of vintage eras. There's 30s, 40s, and 50s in here, and they are stunning. It's mostly garments and sweaters, but there are even some accessories like gloves, scarves, hats, etc. And if you're at all into vintage, you will love just thumbing through this book, if not actually knitting it. I hope you guys have enjoyed this little Saturday night at the movies. Leave a comment below and let me know if you've seen the film, what you thought of it, and what you think of my 40s sweater. Would you knit something like that or not? I won't be offended if you're like, that's not my style, because it's mine and I'm going to wear it whether you like it or not, but let me know if you like the sweater. And also let me know what eras you are most interested in seeing vintage patterns from in the future. I know a lot of you guys really love the vintage patterns that we do. I don't always do vintage looks for Saturday night at the movies, but I do like to do them when I can, and this was a really fun one for me, so I was really excited to share it with you. But I hope you guys are having fun with this series, because I know I am loving it, and I can't wait to share the next one with you. But it is now time to cast off. Love you.